On this episode of The Challenge All-Stars, Brad says my new favorite sentence.
Who can shoot a ball into a mouse hole with a star stick when you have all these divots in front of the hole?
I'm Lizzie Frizzle. Welcome to the Recap Corner. Today, we're talking about The Challenge All-Stars, Season 3, Episode 6, called Revenge of the All-Stars. It might just be the best episode of the season. It's got strong storytelling, thoughtful editing, drama that's related to in-game events. It's funny. It's got an exciting challenge and an elimination that should have been silly, but also ends up being really exciting, thanks in part to one contestant's performance in the arena and another's performance in the interview chair. I would say that a clear intention of this episode was to make the audience happy that the two eliminated contestants are the two eliminated contestants. And I guess you could argue that's the intention of any challenge episode, but it really feels pointed in this one. And we get there via exploring two rivalries. Brad versus MJ and KellyAnne versus Sylvia. First, Brad accuses MJ of playing a scared game. It's the episode's first funny moment because the only person who's playing a more scared game than MJ is Brad. Brad also questions the validity of MJ's knee injury. He doesn't so much question the fact that MJ is injured, he just questions the severity of the injury. And we see a previously unseen flashback to last episode's night out, where MJ tells Mark, kind of in a threatening way, well, not really kind of, definitely in a threatening way, that his knee injury is not as bad as he's been letting on.
My knee is much better than what I'm... The main person that you're playing with, it will be him if I'm the one that's chosen. There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
That it'll be Brad.
Initially, I thought that more would come from this realization that MJ might be exaggerating his injury, but if anything, this episode only further highlighted the fact that MJ's knee is really messed up. Next, there's KellyAnne versus Sylvia, which is really an extension of KellyAnne's season-long battle against Treehouse, just temporarily turned into a one-on-one feud with only Sylvia. Though both rivalries dictate the events of the episode, the relationship between KellyAnne and Sylvia gets the heftier edit. And within that edit, Sylvia's arc, spoiler alert, her downfall, is the main focus. The story of how Sylvia starts the episode in an ideal position and ends the episode eliminated from the game is one of the most fun narratives we've seen so far this season. And not because I was rooting against Sylvia. If anything, I was rooting for her. It's just a really, really well-crafted plot line. One that begins at the top of the episode with Sylvia publicly announcing her intention to sabotage KellyAnne at the next challenge, while simultaneously in the interview chair expressing a desire not to come off like she's on a power trip. After she, Kayla, and Jonna, or Kayla, Jonna, and she, the three of them talk about how much better the vibe in the house is now that Beth is gone. And from that moment forward, it was clear which direction the editors were taking Sylvia's character. The challenge is called Stacked. It's sort of like a mini final, and also like that challenge near the end of the duel. You know, the one that's similar to this one. The game is played in multiple stages. In stage 1, players run down the beach to a station of scratch-off boards, which, when scratched off, reveal 4-digit codes. The cast gets paint scrapers to help with the scratching off, and I hope every single one of them sent a personal thank you note to Ashley, Amanda, and Bettina for being so bad at doing the same thing with just their fingernails during Spies, Lies, and Allies. After revealing your 4-digit code, stage 2 begins. There's another beach run, this time to a series of locked paddles. You use your 4-digit code to unlock one paddle, then grab a nearby stand-up board and start paddleboarding into the ocean. The twist is that there are only 5 paddles available for 7 people, so 2 people are eliminated during this stage. Stage 3 is all about paddleboarding. Contestants paddleboard to a bag of puzzle pieces in the water, then paddleboard back to shore where there are puzzle stations set up. There are only 3 puzzle stations for 5 people, so another 2 contestants are eliminated during this stage. Finally, the last stage is just assembling the puzzle. The first man and woman to finish their puzzles win and will form the authority. The sabotage for this challenge is having an extra lock on your paddle, which means needing to scratch off 2 4-digit codes instead of just 1. I liked this sabotage. I liked that it was specific to this challenge, and even though it didn't actually make all that much of a difference, it felt like it had the potential to. Despite her known intention to sabotage KellyAnne, at the last minute, Sylvia changes her mind and sabotages Jonna instead. Via interview, Sylvia tells us that it's the puzzle component of the challenge that convinces her to sabotage Jonna, since we've seen throughout the season that KellyAnne is often frazzled by puzzle solving. At this point in the episode, I thought Sylvia's decision to switch her sabotage to Jonna for this particular challenge was a good one. The only problem with it was that she'd already publicly announced her intention to sabotage KellyAnne. As for the men, Mark asks if anyone is willing to volunteer for the sabotage, which MJ is, as it turns out. At first, I was really confused by MJ's decision to volunteer, but the more I thought about it, I guess it made sense. If he can't run down the beach and he knows he's not going to be able to win the challenge before it even starts, then why not volunteer to take the sabotage and hope to win some favor with Mark? With all pre-challenge logistics taken care of, it's time for the competition to begin, starting with the men. It's a pretty uneventful heat. Mark and MJ are the first 2 eliminated, so much for MJ volunteering to take the sabotage being a great political maneuver. Derek and Brad take a big lead during the paddleboard section until Derek gets hung up grabbing his bag of puzzle pieces, which allows Jordan to catch up. That leaves Wes and Nehemiah as the next 2 eliminated, which leads to the episode's next great funny moment. Realizing they're about to be out of the challenge, Wes and Nehemiah enjoy a leisurely paddleboard together as best buds, while Enya plays in the background. A music choice by Bella I'm convinced the show made because of Willow Pill.
So now it's just me and Wes taking a nice stroll on a Panamanian ocean.
In the final stage, it's Brad, Derek, and Jordan competing to finish the puzzle. There's another funny moment where Jordan talks about feeling a sense of confidence knowing that he's puzzling against Derek. Then we immediately cut to Derek admitting that he's awful at puzzles.
I'm feeling super good about this puzzle. And luckily, Derek's here. We can always count on Derek to fuck a puzzle up.
I suck!
at puzzles!
At the opposite end of the puzzle spectrum is Brad, who absolutely demolishes this one and wins the challenge. His victory celebration raises the biggest question of the episode for me. Is Brad a Survivor fan, specifically a fan of Michelle Fitzgerald's Survivor Co-Wrong champion, or is it just instinctual to kick that puzzle down? Next, the women compete, and it is a much more suspenseful heat. In the first stage, Veronica and Sylvia are eliminated, even though Veronica is second to arrive at the paddle unlocking station, but she keeps inputting her 4-digit code backwards. Meanwhile, Jonna eats her sabotage and isn't even the last person to unlock a paddle. That honor goes to Ronnie. The second stage of this women's heat is the thing that made me question Sylvia's sabotage swap. We learn that KellyAnne is basically a professional paddleboarder. She owns 3 and regularly does paddleboard yoga. I don't know if the rest of the cast knew this information or not. If they did know, then I would think Sylvia was too focused on the puzzle aspect of the challenge and didn't think about the entire thing when choosing not to sabotage KellyAnne. But if the cast didn't know that KellyAnne had all this paddleboard experience, then I think Sylvia made a good decision based on the information she had in the moment. Regardless, KellyAnne's paddleboard prowess grants her a huge lead when she arrives at her puzzle station. Eventually, she's joined by Ronnie and Jonna, meaning Naya and Kayla are the next 2 eliminated, even though Naya was the first to hit the water on her paddleboard. During this final stage, we get a really sweet segment about Wes and KellyAnne's former relationship when Wes gives her a little bit of help at the start of her puzzle. We also get a lot of Ronnie footage. Unfortunately, it's because she's missing a puzzle piece and doesn't realize it. Eventually, KellyAnne is down to her last piece, but as she's placing it, the wind picks up and knocks the entire puzzle down. We cut to an interview where Veronica calls it proof that in the challenge, you can be on top 1 second and totally screwed the next. But was KellyAnne ever really on top? If her top for this season is almost finishing a puzzle, then she's got a long road to the final. At this point, Jonna, for whatever reason, has seemingly fallen out of the competition, and it's a race between KellyAnne rebuilding her entire puzzle and Ronnie realizing that she's missing 1 piece. Somehow, KellyAnne wins. As she's celebrating, we see the next important piece in the Sylvia's downfall storyline. She tells Kayla, and also sort of Naya, that if she were to ever celebrate the way KellyAnne is, she should be shot. By the way, the celebration that has Sylvia so offended is this.
When I act like that, if I win, just shoot me, okay?
After the challenge, TJ reveals that the sabotages earned by KellyAnne and Brad will be the last sabotages of the season. I have 2 guesses as to what that might mean, and neither is particularly hard to get to. The first is that next challenge might be the last of the season before the final, and the second, which is what I'm more inclined to guess, is that next challenge will have the last sabotages of the season. Then there'll be 1 more regular challenge with no sabotages, then the final. That way, everybody has equal chance of winning the last challenge, the one that would guarantee them a spot in the final. That night, the cast throws a party for everyone who has a birthday coming up. It's basically birthday month from The Office, only the challenge cast enjoys it. Like any good challenge party, the real party at birthday night is the strategizing. Now that KellyAnne is in power, we see Kayla and Sylvia take two very different approaches. Kayla decides to not really attempt any strategizing or deal-making. She accepts that she's targeted KellyAnne since the beginning of the season, and now it's her turn to get targeted. Sylvia, on the other hand, takes the total opposite approach. She and KellyAnne have a little sit-down meeting during the party where Sylvia pitches the idea of targeting Naya literally seconds after KellyAnne names Naya as the only person she's not going to target. The next day, we see the authority deliberation between KellyAnne and Brad. They take an approach I expected to see way earlier during the season because it's a very old school way of doing things. KellyAnne picks the woman that will go into the arena, which ends up being Sylvia, and Brad chooses the man, which ends up being MJ. There's a lot of talk this episode about the personal nature of Brad's repeated targeting of MJ. But in this scene, he makes a really good point. He's already targeted MJ multiple times. MJ has attempted to target Brad back. Why make a new enemy or why target somebody new when the first person you're targeting isn't even out of the game yet? The cast arrives at the arena, where this time the game is called Starstruck. First, players guide a pole through a large vertical maze that has 3 distinct sections. After their pole is free, players use it to shoot a ball into a hole while remaining behind a line. It's basically golf combined with billiards. So, golf billiards. First player to shoot their ball into the hole wins. Sometimes I see these kinds of eliminations referred to as carnival games. I think Wes describes the genre really well in this episode when he says that this is the kind of elimination game that anybody could win on any given day. It's a true crapshoot. When it's time for Sylvia and MJ to announce who they've chosen as their competitors, we get a repeat of the sabotage dole-out. Once again, Sylvia showed up with a plan in place, then at the last second changes her mind. Here, she planned to compete against Jonna, but after seeing the maze, she switches to Naya, fearing Jonna's puzzle abilities. Aside from blindsiding Naya and denying her the ability to mentally prepare for the elimination, I'm not really sure what Sylvia gains by choosing her over Jonna. I would definitely rather compete against Naya in a final than Jonna at the very least. As for the men, after making it clear that MJ wishes he could pick Brad, he chooses Derek. He tries to frame it a little bit like he's choosing the person that will hurt Brad's game the most, but that's obviously not true. Of all the eligible men, Derek is the one with the least amount of ties to Brad. In reality, MJ probably picks Derek because he sees him as the worst at puzzles of the remaining men. And on most days, he's not wrong about that. The women compete first. Naya is first to free her pole. Then she makes the shot on her first try.
Let's go!
I am not in my prime anymore, so I don't know if I can do.
It would have been really impressive on its own, but it's especially satisfying because earlier this episode, Sylvia is shown talking about how unimpressed she's been with Naya's performance. After the elimination, KellyAnne says sorry to Sylvia, and Sylvia responds like this.
Sorry, Syl. Kelly, fuck off. Yeah, KellyAnne can eat shit. I said it once, I'll say it again, I'll say it until my dying breath. Fuck right off, KellyAnne.
Hearing Sylvia call KellyAnne just Kelly was so weird. She encompassed all the intensity and disappointment of your parents calling you by your full name while shortening KellyAnne's name. So yeah, Sylvia starts the episode talking about how great the vibe is now that mean old Beth is gone, and ends the episode telling KellyAnne to fuck off. She also tells KellyAnne that it's personal, even though Sylvia and her Treehouse Alliance are the ones who have been targeting KellyAnne the entire season. What did she expect KellyAnne to do? Target the only other two women who aren't working in the alliance that's been gleefully targeting her all season? Obviously, Sylvia's exit episode doesn't depict her in a particularly flattering light, but for me, that's totally fine. I don't need reality TV personalities to be likable all the time. In fact, I actively don't want them to be. The fact that Sylvia comes off pretty meanly throughout most of the episode is a huge part of why her elimination is so satisfying. In general, I think social media has made it a lot more difficult for villains to exist in reality competition shows, and I think we miss out on a lot of potentially great narratives as a result. A huge part of what made this episode so fantastic was Sylvia's negative edit. KellyAnne's victory, Naya's victory, and the immediate consequences Sylvia seemed to face after every decision she made throughout this episode were all that much more exciting and that much more satisfying because of Sylvia's villainy. And the villainy in question is so mild, I think a reasonable person could argue that it's not even really villainy. Sylvia perfectly hits that sweet spot in between a little nasty and, like mean. And for that, I'm very thankful to her. Next, the men compete. Derek is the first to free his pole from the maze, but does not have Naya's same success on the shooting part. He gets really, really close to scoring a bunch of times, but can't quite get the ball into the hole, which is what leads Brad to say my new favorite sentence, a clip I already played once this video, but I'm going to play it again right now because I love it so much.
Who can shoot a ball into a mouse hole with a star stick when you have all these divots in front of the hole?
Eventually, Derek does get the ball into the hole and, like Naya, wins the elimination before his opponent even finishes the maze section. Derek erupts into celebration. He really taunts MJ. Relentlessly is the word I would use. To the point where it's almost too much. Like, he's almost a sore winner. But since MJ called him into the arena, seemingly because he thought Derek would be the easiest to beat at this particular elimination, I get the over-the-top celebration. I was very surprised that after all this talk over the course of multiple episodes about MJ's knee injury, it didn't come up at all in the elimination that sent him home. Even if he didn't do as well competitively, I still think this was a strong season for MJ. He might have had more screen time than he did last season when he won. He started some new rivalries, he was heavily focused on in multiple plot lines, and I think all those things, all those character building arcs will contribute to his ability to be cast on future All-Star seasons. With MJ's departure, Derek inherits 3 stars, bringing his grand total to 4, more than anyone else in the cast currently has. Will this contribute to his ability to win the season? I don't know, because TJ won't tell us what the stars do. So last week, I named Kayla and Derek as the 2 people I thought were most likely to win the season. Now that another episode has passed, have my feelings changed? Kind of. For the women, they have changed much less. I still think Kayla is probably in the best position, both politically and physically, to compete in a final. But I will continue to hold out hope that Ronnie is going to take the win. As for the men, like we just talked about, Derek's 4 stars should help him a lot if he makes it to the final. But I also think Brad has a great chance of winning the season. If nothing else, for the fact that he's competing at an extremely high level amongst an extremely stacked male cast. On the political front, he's protected or working in some capacity with every guy that's left but Jordan. As for Jordan himself, he's another one that I think could end up winning the whole thing. He does lack allies, and I wouldn't be shocked to see him in every arena from now until the final. But if he makes it to that final, who is going to beat Jordan? I'll tell you who. Ronnie. Thanks for watching. Come back next Tuesday for another Challenge All-Stars recap. We'll be talking about the Trivia Challenge. And in the meantime, if you're so inclined, please like and subscribe. Thanks again. Bye.
This is a magical moment for me.